Welcome back, sir.
Do you know me?
You were in here last Thursday.
Thursday?
You were standing exactly where you are now, asking how good security is. It's tight as a drum, sir.
Who do you think I am?
You're Mr. Durden.
Hello guys, so the movie we chose is Fight Club, and the disorder that is associated with is dissociative identity disorder. And it is a disruption of the usual function of consciousness, memory, and identity. So the film portrays a character who experiences a split in identity, where an alternative personality takes over. Character is unaware that this is part of himself, which reflects features of dissociative identity disorder, also called DID. Some signs and symptoms are two distinctive identities, amnesia, loss of control over behavior, and disassociated. I am the greatest forever. Yes, I am the greatest. I am the greatest forever. Who wrote that? I am the greatest forever. So, as you can tell, those are a couple signs and symptoms of DID. I identified two different identities, and I had amnesia after coming back saying, oh, well, who wrote that? So while the movie does dramatizes the disorder, real DID is typically associated with severe trauma and often misunderstood. However, this disorder is highly stigmatized in media portrayals, and Nicole will talk to you a little bit more about that.
I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep. With insomnia, nothing's real. Everything's far away. Everything's a copy of a copy of a copy. I was living in a state of perpetual deja vu. Everywhere I went, I felt I'd already been there. It was like following an invisible man.
The movie Fight Club largely perpetuates stigma surrounding dissociative identity disorder by portraying it as violent, chaotic, and even empowering. The alternate identity, Tyler, is shown as confident, charismatic, and in control, while the narrator engages in dangerous behaviors such as forming underground fight clubs and organizing acts of domestic terrorism through Project Mayhem. This creates the impression that dissociation leads to intentional violence and loss of moral control. In contrast, DID is typically associated with severe trauma and presents with symptoms such as memory gaps, identity confusion, and significant distress, not calculated violence or dominance. The film also disregards any clear trauma history, which is a key component of DID, further misrepresenting its cause and experience. Additionally, while the narrator's loss of time, such as waking up in unfamiliar places or realizing Tyler has acted without his awareness, does reflect dissociative symptoms, the movie presents these experiences in a highly dramatized and exaggerated way. In reality, DID is often much more subtle and internally experienced, with individuals struggling quietly rather than engaging in extreme or cinematic behaviors. This final scene is a clear example of how the film portrays DID as powerful, destructive, and linked to large-scale chaos, reinforcing the stigma rather than reducing it.
Sometimes Tyler spoke for me.
Fell down some stairs.
I fell down some stairs.
I will be assessing the accuracy in which the movie Fight Club depicts dissociative identity disorder as defined by the DSM-5. The DSM-5 has 5 criteria in which one must meet in order to reach the diagnosis of DID. The first criteria is disruption of identity, characterized by 2 or more distinct personality states, which we do see with our narrator as one personality state and Tyler Durden, his alter, as the second personality state. The second criteria are recurrent gaps in the recall of everyday events, which we absolutely see as the narrator does not remember anything that he does in his alter state as Tyler Durden. And to him, these are 2 completely separate people. The third criteria is significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other areas of functioning, which we see as the narrator is unable to maintain employment, loses his home because it explodes, and moves into a dilapidated home that is unfit for living in. And he also cannot really take care of his hygiene and his appearance anymore. The fourth criteria is that the disturbance is not part of a cultural or a religious practice, which I do not think that we can attribute the disturbance or the creation of Fight Club to any specific cultural or religious practice. And the fifth criteria is that the symptoms are not due to substance use or another medical condition. And while we do see Tyler and the narrator partaking in social drinking, I do not think that this is the source of the symptoms. So they hit all 5 of these DSM criteria. And while the movie is highly dramatized, this is pretty characteristic for Hollywood. And I think overall the movie does a pretty good job of representing all of these diagnostic criteria that someone must meet in order to be diagnosed with DID. I'll let Ileana take it away. Thank you.
Tyler's words coming out of my mouth. And I used to be such a nice guy.
Overall, I think Fight Club was useful to watch. It gave strong examples of how you would see disassociation in a character. It showed things like memory gaps and identity confusion and being disconnected from your own actions. But it was not a fully accurate portrayal of dissociative identity disorder. A lot of it was exaggerated for entertainment purposes, which could be a problem because others might then view people who have dissociative disorders as always being extreme or violent, or having like this dramatic life, which isn't true. In real life, these disorders often are a lot more complex, and they're often connected to traumas. I would recommend this movie to be seen kind of like in a classroom like this. Students, healthcare workers who want to talk about mental illness and the stigma around that. And if the goal is to start a conversation about stigma and the public perception, I think it could be helpful. But I probably wouldn't recommend this to somebody who truly wants an accurate understanding of dissociative identity disorder. And that's our presentation. Thanks for watching.
This conversation is over.
I think we should just get an A.